Welcome everyone to another Professor Hemlock video. Today I want to review and break down a plus 12 Spires. This time it's Tyrannical week, not Fortified. So in theory this would be where Arcane has a lot more weakness. Arcane excels heavily at large AoE packs with uncapped Arcane Explosion AoE damage. And unfortunately, our downside in our main weakness would be the mana issues that can come into play when we're doing single target long fights. So we're going to break down this video here today of this plus 12 Spires and see how we did on Tyrannical. Let's get her going. So as usual, I'm starting off with full buffs, pots, oils, everything for any high key. It's very important that you make yourself as best prepared as possible. This week is also explosive week. Now this group here is insanely on top of explosions. I mean, when I was in this group, I was at one point, I think I actually comment on how quick everyone is explosions. Now, as an Arcane Mage, we have two really good accessible options to kill off the explosions. And for one, that's Fire Blast and Barrage. Now, obviously, we don't want to use Barrage to kill explosions if at all possible. So we do kind of somewhat rely on our group helping us out with explosions because we only have two abilities that are instant cast that can kill explosions. So in theory here, what you should be doing is what you just saw me do there was tab and Fire Blast, tab and Fire Blast, tab and Fire Blast. When Fire Blast is on cooldown, then if no one else gets it, I would say I would wait till the back half of the cast time of explosion, and then I'll use barrage if I'm forced to. Now, obviously, this is like a don't want to do situation. In theory, every 8 seconds you should be killing an explosive every single time, always. Okay, that's kind of our goal here. So remember, Fire Blast, kill explosives. Okay, last resort, wait till the back half of the cast, and then we can use barrage if it's an absolutely necessary pull here. So another thing on Tyrannical is we can pull a little bit bigger on packs. Now we start off pretty slow here. We're just kind of, I think the tank was testing the group again. I do exclusively pug groups here. So these are also all random players that I just happen to group up with. So pretty much what I've done so far. Oh, this is actually a good one to note here too. I am running, instead of Dreamweaver with the double conduit, double potency conduit, I'm actually running Naya here. I was wanting to test out some Naya gameplay. As you can see in the buff section, I have Naya's mastery buff. So essentially whenever you cast Shifting Power, you gain 200 mastery for 30 seconds. Now the buff is rolling. So this means in theory, if you get lucky, you can have a really high uptime on this buff based on Shifting Power. I love this right here. I'm kind of like shitting my pants. I didn't realize we had a demo lock in the group. How many of you guys see demo lock still, or is that a spec that's played? I don't think I've ever seen one. This is my first time ever playing with one. But anyways, every time you cast Shifting Power, you get a full 200 mastery for 30 seconds that can roll over into a longer duration buff. This means we could have an exponentially higher uptime with mastery. Next week, we'll be able to unlock the second potency conduit for Naya, meaning we'll have double potency conduit, a really good uptime 200 mastery buff, and then hopefully that'll turn into just overall a better gameplay experience than Dreamweaver currently offers. That's my working theory right now, so we'll see. And as you can see here, I'm trying to use it when I'm going to have big AoE damage needed, and I'm off cooldown of all my other ones. So as usual here, our job is going to be we're cycling Rune of Power with AP goes. One pull, use the Rune of Power. The next, hopefully you have AP up for it. And then keep cycling back and forth. Now, focusing more on the breakdown of the video here. With that large pack pull, we had an explosive go off. And that explosive did kill our Boomkin here. We're running Boomkin, Demo Lock, Arcane Mage. Kind of a weird comp here. And we're seeing a Monk Healer, so... Something that really looking at how we're doing this right here, look at our positioning. We have myself on the back left, we have our demo on the back right, and at the far side in the other corner is our boomkin. This is great positioning right here. We're really spread, so no one has to continually move for those prideful AoE hits. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. If you can position yourself far away from each other at the beginning of the pull, that's going to help. Now on Spires here too, since both of these bosses take damage, when they're placed together, we can get a bunch of damage out. Now, you're going to see me here get hit by one of the little Spire little hits here, and that does a lot of damage. You want to avoid getting hit by those at all costs. You will die to them if you get hit by 2 in a row, so definitely avoid them. So like right here, I could get some cleave damage in if I wanted, but I'm not going to be able to. Now it is Tyrannical, so as you should always have possible to do. See, I did get the spear there, and I shimmered into a corner. Now, if we want to fight on this back side, I just made it really easy for my group to avoid taking any unnecessary damage from the AoE that it puts out. So always use your mobility options in that situation. You can see there I did tab to Fire Blast that explosion, but it looks like our tank just quickly got it, so that's good. And I end up getting that one. So here I've cycled through cooldowns. Now it's really important on Tyrannical that you're actually using your AP at the very beginning of every pull, if you can, on boss fights. You should be able to, in theory, if you get enough clearcast procs, to get off 2 arcane powers per boss pull. So you can see right now the boss is pretty low. You know, we're at like 10% right now, and I have AP coming off cooldown again here. I'm going to make sure my mana's high. So I was too low on mana to get full use out of that AP. So I evocate to make sure I have enough, and then I'm going to finish off here. Something you can kind of see me doing here now, I actually think in this situation, I correct myself. So I was casting Arcane Blast there instead of using Arcane Explosion when I had no Arcane charges. This is something you got to be aware of. If you're at a low percentage boss health, do not cast Arcane Blast when you have no charges. You are massively wasting your time. You are that cast time is so long, it's actually more damage to cast Arcane Explosion. So my general rule of thumb here is if the boss or an AoE pack or whatever we're doing is sub 15% and there's a primary target that I could in theory hit with Arcane Blast, I would actually at sub 15% use Arcane Explosion instead, generate up to 2 charges, then dump with Barrage. So it'd be Explosion, Explosion, Barrage, Explosion, Explosion, Barrage. But if it's on Tyrannical week, that might change, right? We might need to start doing that a little bit like later, especially if you have mana, right? Since our execute phase is fairly long, we do want to make sure we're able to keep spamming Arcane Blast at a full charge, four charges, if we have the mana to. So generally, when we get into the initial execute phase at 35%, I'll drop my barrages. Depending on my mana, if I timed this correctly, I should be out of mana. And then I can go into a simple rotation of Presence of Mind up to 4 charges, well, 3 charges, then cast Arcane Blast once, then dump, then use my Orb up to 2 charges, then Blast, and then dump again. And then I would start either going back, depending on my mana pool and the length of the boss fight, I would go into a full just Arcane Blast, 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 until I'm out of mana, dump charges, back to Presence of Mind, back to Orb cycling, and then continuing that rotation. It is more DPS to, if you have the mana, to spam 4 charge Arcane Blast, okay? So that's an important note there. It's more damage if you have the mana to spam 4 charge Arcane
Charging
Blast.
battery.
So I kind of make the comment here on how quickly everyone's tabbing. I think it's the tank who ends up having the most kills on the explosives. So this tank's just doing a really good job of tabbing. He's a druid, so he's got a good advantage. Now, something we always want to try and do on Spires is we want to tick as much as possible. The greater mending from the menders, Now again, look at our positioning here. We tried to split up a little bit. I think I move a little too close to the group, but there is an AoE, or not an AoE pack, a padding patrol that comes around that corner, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't caught by the patrol. So I did still kind of stay split. You can see the Boomkin in the far back corner there, and me and the Warlock are still split enough to where we'll have a fair enough time to react to any of the Pride. So this is still good positioning. And then kind of here, I try to use some cooldowns if I can on Pride. Now you can see here that boss is at a low percent. I'm explosion, barraging, right? AoE pack. I'm going to drop my rune, Touch of the Magi, barrage, arcane explosion, orb. And I should have barraged there instead of explosioning. I had 4 charges. It would have been maximal DPS to drop my charges with the barrage. Now see there, I was at no charges. I blasted, then I orbed, and I went back to blasting. I'm at 100% mana right now, so again, it is more DPS to spam 4 charge arcane blast than it is to spam barrage, arcane explosion barrage. When you're at full mana, use that mana, especially the prideful buff. You have an insane amount of mana regen. You can hold 4 charges for a long time when you had this prideful buff up. So I do have AP here, and I'm going to use it. This next pull is a really big pull, and typically you would want to save AP for this next pull, but I know that the Boomkin has his big damage next pull, and I know the Warlock has his big damage next pull. So what I can do here is I can maximize my DPS and help the group out by killing that pack fast, and then our next pack, we can have other people use big cooldowns. So that is something to kind of be aware of. If you can track friendly cooldowns, just kind of be aware as best as you can. So right there, I'm doing the tab fire blast. I was worried no one would get that one, so I did barrage that one. It looked like the monk was actually going to run and get it. So right there, when that mob was low and I had the clear cast, I actually should have used my, or held explosion and held my missiles and used missiles to generate more cooldown reduction like I did right there. So since my AP's on cooldown and I know the druid, look at that Boomkin pop off on the damage meters right there. He is using big cooldowns. So my goal with this pack is not to really do a bunch of damage. My goal is to make my AP as best as possible. So I want to have my AP up for the next big pull. So I did open that pack with a missiles instead of just going straight into an AoE rotation. Sometimes it's not about your DPS on a specific pull. When you do have teammates that are using heavy cooldowns, let them utilize their full cooldowns, especially if you're grouped with a fire mage, right? If I'm grouped with a fire mage, he has a 12-second long combust window, and during that window, he's going to do an insanely large amount of damage. Or they're going to do an extremely large amount of damage. So I want to make sure my fire mage is able to utilize his combust as best as possible, or her combust as best as possible. And I'm going to let them do their thing. I'm going to hold my CDs for a future pack. So that's kind of something to be aware of. Make sure you're not overutilizing cooldowns on one pack, unless it's a necessary pack. Like, say we're doing, on Fortified Week, we're doing a big double pull or something like that. So here we did kill them nice and evenly. So look at that right there. We had the Pride spawning at 60%. We made sure the mobs died right as the Pride was spawning. Now I did drop my rune, but I am out of mana right here, so I'm just going to dump, and I'm going to just go into a little bit of like a weak builder rotation, since I don't really have any damage to put out. Now right there, unfortunately, we weren't spread enough to prevent my monk from getting hit by that. If I was a little bit more aware, I probably would have moved slightly ahead, and it would have prevented him from taking that damage there. Something as well, I've already cycled through 3 lock cookies so far. Having a warlock in your group is amazing. I keybind my lock rocks to a easy to press key. It's Z in this case for me, or it's actually X. Yeah, there you go. That's what it is. Wrong thinking here. So right here, We have a lot of explosives in the group because we double pulled, so you've got to focus those explosions. And right now, I have nothing to kill them with. I have Barrage on cooldown and I have Fire Blast on cooldown. As it's coming off, I'm going to be able to tab and get them as best as I can. I still have Kick on cooldown, so we can't kick that Forsworn Doctrine, so we're taking a massive amount of damage on this pull from accessory mobs. I do get the tab Fire Blast there, and I shifting powered, so now I have Fire Blast back off of cooldown, so I can hopefully tab and Fire Blast that one, and then Barrage that one. There we are. All right. I'm doing good. But it's more important. Sacrifice DPS on explosive weeks. You need to kill those explosives. Sacrificing DPS is just fine. So right now, I did have shifting power go off. So I do have that full stack, but it looks like I'm going to drop stacks going into this boss here. This is a lust fight here, so I do kind of shift my normal traditional single target rotation due to how this boss plays. I know I'm going to have a lot of movement, and I have lust right off the bat. Normally, I would open with a rune, build up my clear cast charges, and then go into an AP phase directly after. But this boss typically requires a lot of movement, and I was worried that I would have to move too much. But in this case, I've stood there, so it would have actually been better if I had done a traditional opener where I did have to stop my evocate there, and I still got hit by it. That's kind of a bummer. But note positioning-wise here, where we're at, we are as far away as possible from all this. Now, I am going to block this here, so when the boss does this from the shadows, I witness your demise, and teleports to someone, you get a very nasty bleed debuff here. And I wanted to use that early, get the block. I blocked it, get that damage out, and she comes right back to me and applies it again. So now I have this 15-second debuff where our healer is going to have to focus a bunch on me. So what do? I invis. Now I'm taking a little bit less damage, and I pop my mirror images. So now I have quite a bit of damage mitigation in the short term here to try and survive. The monk does still have to use a cooldown on it to keep me up, and we're getting a lot of people taking group damage right now. Now our druid has the debuff. I've gotten hit by all of the little sharpshooter things flying out all the time, and we end up having our druid fall. Druid does get battle rest here. The boss is at a really low percentage, but he stands in the AoE mechanic again, and I believe the druid does die again here. So he got battle rest and died again. So something that's very important to do is try and avoid mechanics on this as much as possible, and try and be as far away from the spawns of the shooters as possible. And we still end up downing the boss anyways. And it looks like we topped the damage meters on that fight. Arcane Mage! It's always funny playing Arcane. You do get some people who are surprised at how much damage you do. Like, what? What is this? This guy's the wrong spec. What is he doing? Now, at this part, most tanks will do some skipping here. So it is always something to be aware of that you do have invis. If you're ever worried on the skip coming up here in this dungeon that you need to use your invis, or if you just want to be extra safe, you can use your invis instead of saving it as a defensive utility. Now, since we did have someone die, I made sure to reapply int. If you do ever have anyone in your party die, including obviously yourself, make sure you rebuff intellect. That 5% int buff right now, with how insane primary stats are, is quite a bit of healing throughput and damage throughput bonus. So just to be aware, if you do have anyone die, re-int buff. Keep your party healthy. And then, of course, if you're playing with a warlock, make sure you use those cookies, right? Every time you can. So this skip right here, this is something you could use invis on. We do have a big mistake coming up here that I want to kind of point out here. If you are a pet class, our warlock doesn't get his pets dismissed properly. So we're about to have a group wipe occur where we get a full double heal, a double pull. Now, right there, that greater mending is really what you want to kick. You really, really, really want to kick that, but I was unable to. I had my kick on cooldown, so I was not able to kick it. No, we're still tabbing. We're making sure. We're gonna another greater mending is gonna go off. My kick is still on. 2 seconds of cooldown. And now at this point, we have the double pull. The Warlock's pets caused a double pull, and we're going to get a group wipe. Now I'm re-int buffing here, and I looked at my party frames here while I'm doing this. We did have a wipe, right? Got to cast that intellect again. It looks like the Boomkin missed my intellect, so I am going to re-intellect buff him up. If you are using the standard Blizzard UI, which I personally prefer, I do a lot of PvP, and the standard Blizzard UI is just probably one of my favorites. Anyways, it's just basic, it's clean. I don't think you need anything too fancy here. I make a demon's joke here, I think. Yeah. Ha 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 ha. uh... Side note, if you're watching the video this far, and if you're interested in commenting and telling me your feelings on some things, how would everyone feel about maybe fire content or frost content? Or, yeah, if anyone's interested in anything else besides me just playing Arcane. I know I've kind of so far made a lot of Arcane videos, but it's because I love Arcane. But I do play all 3 specs, and if anyone's interested, let me know. And maybe I'll make some videos on some other specs. We'll see how they play. So now getting back into it here, I did re-int buff. Something if you're using the Blizzard UI that's kind of note, I think, is that the int buff does disappear when you're in combat, but everyone is still buffed. Now, kind of seeing what I did there in that position, now I know if I launched my orb forward, it was possible that I could pull that additional pack. So I juked to the side there, got a good angle, and then tossed my orb out. Very important for you to be aware of your orb and positioning. I know sometimes I get caught up in the DPS rotation myself, and I make mistakes where I use my orb, just send that thing out, and then I'll cause a double pull. But just try and make aware that when you toss that orb out, it's just going to travel as far as it goes. Now, in Spires here, you're going to follow the tank as tight as possible, stay mounted. And these little AoE guys are they just wreck damage. So you want to line of sight the damage. And what happens here is our Warlock does not line of sight the damage, and the Warlock gets potted. So now that the tank's out there, he's got threat built up on all of them, and the ads are coming around. I'm going to start damage on them. They do swap targets to me. They're unthreatable. The tank can never get threat. And then I went around the pillar and made sure I got the additional packs. So now we're going to get Pride. It's super important if you can, obviously, find a tank that knows the route very well if it's your key. Otherwise, make sure that the tank does pull Pride with a boss. So our next pull is going to be boss. Now, on this fight, it is a mechanic-heavy fight. So there's not much real challenge in this next boss. So even though, in theory, we could lust this next boss, generally it's going to be better to save for the final boss in this situation, because this boss doesn't have any real enrage mechanics, right? This is just a do your damage rotation, don't stand in shit, and you're going to be just fine. So I'm going to get in a good position behind the boss here. Now, I didn't really have, again, same situation. I had Rune on cooldown, and I had my starters on cooldown, so I just go into a straight AP go phase. And again, this one requires a lot of movement, so I just left my rune. My rune's dead that I still had time left on, and I think that happens actually a couple times in this fight. This is a lack of awareness on my part. What I should have done here is I even have, you can see on my screen there, I have the timers for the abilities that are going to go off. I should make sure to never drop a rune or AP rune when that Imperial Ordnance is coming up. Otherwise, I'm just forced to move away from my rune. So something to be aware of. Deadly Boss Mods does have a time tracker, so you can maximize your uptime with rune, making sure that you're not just having to dump and get away from your rune. So right here, I'm staying tight behind the boss. You want to try and keep these stacks nice and tight so your tank doesn't have to kite in too big of a pattern around. I did drop a rune there since we have some time. And I had the full shifting power buff, so I had shifting power into a rune. Now the Boomkin's actually going to run away from me here. I do miss block. I don't think I should have blocked there. That was a mistake. I should have saved it for this section right here. So on this boss, you're going to be collecting orbs. Now, you do want to spread them because you get a stacking debuff when you take an orb that's going to nuke the living shit out of your health pool, right? I just kind of moused over there. I have 4 of them. I'm taking like 3,000 damage a second. I pop my mirror images to reduce that damage by 20%, and I try and defensive out of it. The healer was able to easily heal through it with the help of some of those defensive utility options. Now we have the ordnance. This is where I made a huge mistake. I wasn't aware of the timer on the ordnance. I dropped a rune. Now look what I did. I got a dead rune. So I just lost out on 5 to 6 seconds of rune buff. So that's a big mistake, considering a lot of your damage bonus comes from that rune uptime. And I did get a second AP, so I've had 2 APs this fight right now. Now I'm trying to get I get a nice shimmer in. Look at that shimmer at the last second, and I drop my puddle right on top of the tank's puddle. So now we have a lot more space to work with. So that's kind of what you're looking for when that Imperial Ordnance comes out. Beautiful shimmer in. Use your mobility options. Now I've got a secondary go phase set up here. After the Imperial Ordnance has gone out, I drop my rune, I touch the Magi, and I start spamming into some damage. Now, right here, I do kind of make a little bit of a mistake. It's kind of debatable. I could have used a mana gem. Gosh, trying to think of the name. I could have used a mana gem right there and then spammed out maybe 1 or 2 arcane blasts more before having to dump. But since the boss is lower on health, I think it's fine to do just dumping there. I do actually get another arcane power going on here. I know the boss is low and I probably could save it for the next one, but on Tyrannical, rather be safe than sorry. Even if you have some arcane power uptime, like right there, I had probably 70% of my arcane power was utilized on finishing off the boss there. That is still valuable to use. Get as many arcane powers as you can on Tyrannical week. Just smash it. Use it, use it, use it. Get it on cooldown. Make sure you're doing all of that AP uptime as possible. Unfortunately, I do die here to the hurlers. Now, if you look at my cooldowns right now, I have mirror image on cooldown and invis on cooldown. So that was a mistake on my part. I should not have died there. I had 2 defensive utility options that would have escaped death. So that is on me for making that mistake. Right there, I had Fire Blast on cooldown, so I did have to barrage that explosion. It's better to barrage the explosion and waste that barrage damage than it is to take that explosive damage. Explosive damage is very high, and if 1 or 2 go off, it's basically a full wipe. I do have kick on cooldown here, so I cannot get that kick I kicked earlier. Unfortunately, one of the downsides of playing with a Boomkin and another Warlock is when you're caster heavy, you have a lot less kick uptime. Mage kick is on a 24-second cooldown. Warlock kick's on a 24-second cooldown. Boomkin kick is on a 45-second cooldown. So we're very low on kicks as far as total uptime of kicks in a pack. So right here, the tank does die, unfortunately, and everyone's dying. I actually shimmer and have an invis. But right here, I kind of make a decision, right? Since the res is right behind us and the tank's pod broke, I'm going to pop my mirror images, and I'm just going to go into a DPS phase. I do use a Touch of the Magi and AP, and I'm going to try and down these mobs before. I was going to take a little bit of splash AoE damage. Since my health is really low, I block the splash damage, and then I start going back into pumping on this mob. I kind of make the decision here that I think it's better to try and kill the mobs as opposed to just wiping it out. And this ends up being the right decision. I was able to assist in the tank, getting back up, killing the mobs, and that AP was a good decision there. Now, going into the top phase here, it is Tyrannical week again, so we don't have to worry too much about utilizing massive cooldowns on these three little supplemental adds. But you should be able to use AP on at least one of them prior to pulling the boss. The first or the second one would be fine, since you're always going to have a pride spawn after the third ad. You can use AP on the first ad or second ad. That way you're ensuring that you're going to have AP up by the boss pull. These dudes do still do a lot of damage here. I'm trying to get my food buff back up, so I actually do. I re-food buff after the death. I re-intellect. Every little ounce counts. Our monk here actually is using the crit trinket, so you see that little red circle on the ground near me. That red circle is a big crit bonus. I think it's like 200 crit or something around there based on your eye level. So very important if you do see that red circle drop, whoo, get in that little thing. Crit is very important for Arcane, and it can really buff your damage up when you're not even using major cooldowns. Like here on this pull, that was a non-AP pull right there. That was simply a Rune of Power pull, and I am leading the damage done meters here by a substantial margin. And this is a single target week. This is a week where Arcane is supposed to not do that good, right? So we rely on that uncapped AoE to do a bunch more damage. Now here I do use AP again. First or second one, you should have AP up by the boss. So I pop my AP, touch the Magi, and I'm going to pump into this. It does look like the Druid uses Convoke as well, so this is kind of a misstacking of CDs, but at a certain extent, his Convoke needs to be up by the boss pull anyways, since his Convoke needs to be up by the boss. He getting that extra use out of there. Now you can kind of see I tab over the buff from the Mastery. I did get a cycle on the buff, so I get to keep my 8 stacks, which is the full 200 a little bit longer. It's kind of nice. Now, I'm not holding CDs here because we do have the Pride coming up, which is nice. Again, tab, Fire Blast, making sure explosives are your number one priority. I had a rune out. I had damage going on that mob. Explosives matter more. Take the time. The damage meters matter much less this week, especially on Tyrannical. The meters don't matter as much because the only real meters that are going to matter are what you're doing on the boss fight and then killing the explosives to make sure you don't wipe. Again, lovely little tab. I did stand in a mechanic on that previously there, so now I'm trying to avoid it, so I shimmer out to get into a better position, but I'm still taking a bunch of damage. And it looks like now they did change this, so once you down the boss, I'm trying to get a little eat in before the Pride spawns. And I am not going to hold any CDs. The Prides do a stacking continual AoE damage. So no matter what, the group is going to continually take a lot of damage. So even though I could hold my rune here to get a better start on the boss, I'm not going to. I'm going to just use it. Let's get the DPS rolling. Now, something I try to do here, I believe I do this, is right there. I used my secondary trinket. So I have the trinket from the raid that gives you a mastery buff when a mob dies on it. So right here, I'm going straight into an AP go because I have the extra mastery bonus, and I'm going to try and pump the living shit out of this boss. We have Pride. We have Lust. This is just AP. Use that go. Big damage. Now, something you can be aware of here too, if you start seeing, like right here, I make another mistake. I drop my rune, then we need to get into the detonation. And because of that, I lost probably 2 or 3 seconds on my Rune of Power. Big mistake. If you can, make sure you're just dropping your Rune of Power in the safety circle, the detonation circle. That way, you don't even have to worry about it. You're already in the circle. You don't have to move. Run through is one of the boss's abilities here. We do have our Boomkin die again. Our Boomkin seems to be taking a lot of mechanical damage this run and dying several times to mechanic. Every B-res has been used on the Boomkin. Using our mobility options here to make sure we're on the orbs. Now, this is a great time to use mirrors right here, mirror images. You're going to take a stacking debuff that no matter what will do damage to you. So use your mirror images. That's a 20% damage reduction for the duration of that fight, and then you're going into be a safer place. Now, right here, this was another mistake in my rotation. I had a AP coming off cooldown in 14 seconds. I should have held Touch of the Magi for that situation. Instead, I dropped my rune in Touch, and then I think I realized around here, like, shit, I made a mistake. I get into the detonation safety circle. I evocate. Now here's where I do some good things. I shifting power. Now I have the full buff from Naya. I AP. I have 4 charges. I'm praying the guy pulls the boss back, and of course I get the little circle on me anyways. But I have time. So I do lose another rune of power here. So this is something I need to improve on dramatically as Arcane Mage here. I drop my rune in a not good spot, and then I'm forced to move a lot. So that is something I need to work on. I do drop this rune in the safety circle, so that finally I'm doing something good here. But again, this is, somewhat a little bit, you're going to be fine if you're making small DPS mistakes. We'll see here, I'm still topping the DPS meters on single target right now. Even over a Boomkin and a Warlock. The Warlock did go down to a run-through. Just don't stand in front of those run-throughs. That's a one-shot mechanic for our little clothies. Right here, what I should have done probably was invis to take reduced damage, but the healer, now that we have a dead person, is going to take a lot less healing to keep everyone up. Now he's having to heal a lot less. I do use my secondary on-use trinket here for this small go. If you have a secondary on-use trinket, make sure you're popping that secondary on-use trinket as much as you can. Run through occurs. Only the tank gets hit by it. Yay, look at us go. I have AP up again, so what am I going to do? I'm going to get my shifting power out. I should have probably evocated first, shifting power, then AP, but right here, I do still have the buff from Naya, and then I'm using AP, and then I'm going to pop my go. We're at 16 seconds left on the timer here, so at this point, it is full-blown, every ounce of damage, kill the boss, barrage, just sink every inch of damage you have on it. I even Touch of the Magi into a barrage there, knowing that I'm not going to get much damage out of it. And we do time the key. So I kind of want to re-summarize here. Again, tight butthole. That was a close timer. It was like 5 seconds left. And we get a nice little cloak. I have my legendary equipped for Arcane right now that's rank 1, so this technically isn't an upgrade. So I think we're going to pull up the damage meters here in a second. We'll kind of see my damage breakdown on what Tyrannical week is. So we did time the key. That feels good. Love to see a timed key. You're a mage. Make a portal for all your homies and ship them on out of here. And then now we get a damage breakdown. So kind of noting my damage breakdown here, the difference between Tyrannical and Fortified, really crazy difference. Barrage is still holding about the same percent. Generally, you're going to have Barrage should be somewhere between 27 to 32% of your total damage done, regardless of the week. But the big swap is going to be Arcane Explosion coming in at only 12% and Arcane Blast coming in at 27%. Generally speaking, Arcane Blast and Arcane Explosion are going to trade damage percentages in Tyrannical versus Fortified, where missiles should be number 3 always, and you're having the other two just trade back and forth. So that's a big thing to note. You're going to see a lot more damage coming from Arcane Blast. Now, kind of finishing out the video here, summarize some things. Again, Fortified week, Tyrannical week, okay? Tyrannical, we're doing a bunch more damage on bosses, making sure we have as many AP goes as we can. You can open up with AP on the boss instantly to ensure you're maximizing as much APs as possible, getting at minimum 2 APs on a boss, sometimes even 3, as much as possible. Don't be like me, get better with your rune positioning. Make sure you're able to stay in your rune for as long of the duration of the rune as possible. Check your boss timers. Make sure you're able to stand in that rune. And on Explosive Week, you have Fire Blast, you have Barrage. Those are your 2 instant cast killing buttons. Every 8 seconds, you should be using Fire Blast to kill an explosive, no matter what. All the time, 100% do it. Help your group out. Tab Fire Blast. If in a dire situation when it looks like no one else is going to be able to get the explosion, use your barrage. Even though I know it feels terrible, do it. Save your group. It's more important for the arcane barrage to go wasted than to have your group die to explosives. I want to thank everyone for watching today's video. Professor Hemlock here, signing out. Everyone have a great day.